Hellarena. Novel by Ayed Hindi. Part 4. Chapter 15. The Signal That Never Arrived. King Avauda's military plan for the Gallatin forces, who were stationed in the buffer zone, was to wait for a signal from Ravdan after he would assassinate and eliminate the heads of the Malanese at that presumed gathering so that they could move and begin their attack on the Malani forces standing opposite them. Namely, Ravdan would throw 3 arrows in succession into the sky. Each one of the arrows carries a different flame, which would indicate success in the mission. Nevertheless, after long waiting and the agreed signal having not been received from Ravdan, the head of the Gallatin army, who was actively preparing for the final assault, asked Marketh what the instructions were if there was no signal received, and what the fate of the thousands of prepared soldiers waiting to march on was. Though he had no ready answer for the generals, Marketh went back to ask the king himself about his options for the unexpected emerging impasse and, if there was an alternative plan, at least for the army to begin their assault. King Avauda was sitting on his throne alone in the royal chamber, contemplating deep into what went wrong. I haven't heard back from Ravdan until this moment. Has something bad happened to them? Was he captured alongside his group, or had he defected to the Malanese? He knows too many secrets, but would he be revealing any of my plans to them? I've got to not send Ravdan. Avauda kept on mumbling to himself. I don't want to regret any of my decisions, however. I will wait for that signal from Grimo. Maybe he will send back the signal himself and the attack can start. Marketh entered the royal chamber and asked the king, "My lord, your army is ready, but we have received no signal from Ravdan until now. What do you want to order, my lord?" "What do you think, Marketh? Do you think Ravdan joined the Malanese? Was it pre-planned? Has he decided to hurt me on purpose?" Questions baffled Marketh, who stood amazed with no thoughts of how to respond to his confused king. Long silence and many thoughts landed unexpectedly upon the king, who sat bewildering and waited for long, but not enough until a military messenger came and asked to tell the king that the Malanese army had apprehended Ravdan and his company, and they are now imprisoned and the enemies want to exchange them in return for a deal. It sounded like a nightmare for the king, although this dreadful option had crossed his mind, but for him, it was the worst scenario to expect to happen, and the king ordered to halt the much-anticipated attack for now until he hears their demands in return for Ravdan's release. Marketh came to speak to the king and asked him, "Your Majesty, do you want me to go there on your behalf and negotiate their terms for the release?" King Avauda was very upset and disappointed because, for him, it was a double blow, a personal loss. The idea to enter the city was all made by him, and the loss of Ravdan, one of the most trusted officers in his army. However, his pride was even more important for him. "No, Marketh, tell the messenger to inform the Malanese that if they want to negotiate, we will accept their delegation to come to here on one condition. Their leader Barkle should head that delegation to make it worth talking to them and humiliating them as well. But your Majesty, their envoy will pass through our advanced army lines, and they will take notice of our war preparations for the attack, and they just might uncover our plans against them. We can't pull back now our equipment and other materials from the front lines. Don't you think that they know everything by now? They had our brightest soldiers in their hands, and we have to change our plans anyway. We can't take chances on our soldiers' life. Do as I say, and tell the messenger exactly what I ordered, and I will speak again to the military generals to prepare for a new strategy to attack the city." That was far cry from convincing, at least for Marketh for now, but he did what the king has ordered him to do and informed the opposite party about the king's arrangement for the negotiations. After exchanging delicate information and the purposed plan between both sides, Barkle decided to accept the offer and to travel to King Avauda Palace and negotiate with him about the presumed prisoners' exchange plans. He could not do this matter only after deep deliberation and counseling with his own trusted deputies and the other clan representatives who supported him in his mission and accepted that in case he was unable to return, then Princess Lion would assume his post and be the new leader of the Malay United Nations. Barkle crossed the front line into the Galatians' military-controlled territory, and he was accompanied closely by the armed guards, driven by the carriages to the king's palace on the Marvel Lava Lake. It was a long journey to there, passing the army lines and through exclusive roads, and when they got nearer, the convoy stopped and Barkle dismounted from the carriage, looking over the lava lake. It was a great palace sitting on a huge rock in the middle of the lake. There was only one bridge that connected the palace to the land, made of the bones and skulls of the dead soldiers from the Malanies. It was so called the Dead Bone Bridge. It could not take too much weight, maybe on purpose to protect the palace, and Barkle knew about that infamous bridge. He moved closer to the bridge and then started to pray before embarking on it. Marketh was on the other side, waiting and watching him. Barkle didn't want to defile the sanity of the dead soldiers, and he asked, "Is there any way to get to the palace without crossing the bridge?" His accompanied officer told him that he had to cross the bridge to get to the palace, and there was no other way around. "Be careful when you cross the bridge. It is weak because it was made of infidels' bones," shouted Marketh. Barkle walked on the bridge alone and quietly. It was about 50 meters away, and he was received by Marketh, who led him through the palace gates to a long and wide corridor leading to the main royal chamber at the end of that corridor. Marketh went inside first, followed by Barkle. "Behold, you are in the presence of the mighty Lord, King Avauda, the supreme ruler of the eternal fire and the holder of the eternal key. Kneel, you infidel." Loud shouts came from Marketh, the high commander of the king's security guards, who rattled the grand stately columned hall that embraces the great golden throne where King Avauda usually sits and rules. His hoarse and gruffly voice echoed from all the chamber's corners to the annoyance of the first man, Barkle, the chief in command of the Malanese army. His people were striding fearlessly against the immense powers and the brutality of the king's own army. They had to defend their remaining scarce population from total extinction and elimination at the pitiless wishes of the ruthless king, who was viciously commanding the fierce, brutal campaign to root out the hollow planet population. For the reason of the depleting sparse resources that exist inside that planet, although their troops are still engaged in this merciless war of survival, Barkle attended this meeting upon King Avauda's request to negotiate his officers' release from captivity at the hands of his enemies, the Malanese. Nonetheless, for Barkle, the matter was all but a gambit to gain some time and prepare for a new offensive. The unfazed Barkle replayed to the king loudly, "You asked for the meeting, and now I am here to share half of my suffering and surround people to hear your requests." King Avauda was sitting quietly on his golden stately throne, surrounded by his army officers and special guards, staring at Barkle in contempt with a heart filled with pique and malevolence. "I want Ravdan back with his company immediately." As the king finished his threatening words, a tranquil silence was prevailing inside that royal chamber at the time. Barkle was thinking hard about what his answer would be to that arrogant king. "In return for what, sir?" asked Barkle the king. It was a cynical request from Barkle, as he knows for sure there is no way back for Ravdan again, and it was just to gain a bit of respite for his tired and exhausted troops. The king didn't answer Barkle, but only after a period of time. "You know, we don't keep prisoners in order to be exchanged with." There was an instant burst of laughter that captured the gathering around the king and the despise and disdain that Barkle felt instantly from this vile remark. "But we can offer your people, I mean what is left of them, a respite for a few days to bury your fallen cowards before we finish them all off in our next attack." Not much of an offer, Barkle was thinking to himself, but he would still need to bargain with the king despite his grievous evilness, and after a short silence and deep thoughts, "Is he very valuable to you?" "Respect, you infidel," shouted Marketh. "Remember who you are, and to whom you are present, lousy vile." Barkle didn't pay much attention to Marketh's wailings, as he understood the dilemma happening here before his own eyes. The king has lost one of his most important officers to his enemies, and he is dearly wanting him back and needs to deal with the people he most hates. "You should offer more than just a breath of fresh air and a short reprieve, sir. You are very lucky that we appreciate humanity and we keep the prisoners alive and well looked after, and in return, you may consider removing your troops backwards and also pulling the Groomdom attacking towers back from and around our besieged Zediapolis positions as a good gesture for our brave troops, that is defending our city." It was a bold and gallant gambit from Barkle, who deliberately mentioned those towers in a way to insinuate and convince the opponents that those are of high importance. But he knows that his army is preparing for the last assault against the Galatians' armies, no matter what their positions are. Even though his army was scattered around Zediapolis, the big city of the Malinese nations, and he thought it could be bait that could be swallowed by the arrogant Galatians king, he ordered everyone in his chamber to leave, except for Marketh and Barkle, barring everyone from listening to the conversation that was to occur between him and Barkle. Tell me, Barkle, did Ravdan capture or defect to your side? I would like to hear an honest answer. You have sent him in order to assassinate all of us inside the holy temple and in front of our Blue Plusive in the middle of our prayers. Blue Plusive opened his eyes and rained his weapon, and he is now under our mercy alongside his company of soldiers. You know your fate is determined by me. Your people are doomed to go extinct. That is a pledge, and it is a convent I made with Blue Plusive. I don't want Ravdan to die among your cowards. I can spare a few lives to stay on this planet, and you can join the last remaining deserved clean people. Barkle knew from past painful experiences that the king was disingenuous and all rhetoric was mere deceptive subterfuge and a mean trick, and he answered the king. We can all live on this planet together in peace if you stop your unremitting greed and if you reinstate and restore the old order. The order that you destroyed and replaced it with blood and carnage. We all would be in a better state. You know very well that there were not enough resources left on this planet to feed the whole nation. Some had to go and leave the place for the stronger and the better to enjoy the planet. There was no place for the weak and the feeble, but this is now from the past, and as I mentioned before, I don't want Ravdan to die among your people. Send him back to me and let me be happy with you. You can still enjoy the few remaining years of your life. Barkle answered the king with a smirk on his face. Do you want me to live among total annihilation and without my people? It is not my favorite option. However, can you tell me, King of Auda, if you may, how you made this convent with the double one? The king stood from his throne and walked down the few steps toward the aisle that cut the royal chamber, followed by Marketh, who kept walking over the fine marbled aisle until he stopped in front of a grandiose altar set uniquely next to the praying wall. Then he opened his hands as if he were praying to the Almighty. Red Minos has answered my sincere prayers to His Holiness. The Almighty knows what is good for this planet and for our people. Red Minos pledged to save our nation and to help our people to victory over the enemy. Red Minos paved the way for our people to acquire strength and wisdom, and without the Almighty blessing, we want to be able to reach so far in our rightful campaign, with our offerings and our prayers accepted, as we were always truthful about our desires and our ambitions. Whoever wins shall stay and live forever. That is the pledge, and we shall be immortals. Everything will lay before our hands, our strong and undetermined hands. We shall be victorious forever. Our race will dominate, expand, and spread all over this planet. We shall build the whole temple of power and dominance, surrounded by great cities, to show our great appreciation for Red Minos mercy. Our will never yield until the final victory is soon ours. Then the king turned to Barkle, after ending his own speech. Do the right thing for yourself and your own family. Go and bring me back my officer, Ravdan, and the other hostages you are holding there, and I shall reward you very generously, Barkle. Don't be tempted by any stupid advice or indulge yourself in the thinking that your troops can ever resist the mighty Galatians' army who are knocking at your besieged city's doorsteps. They are waiting for my signal to raise and level your last ruins and wipe out and finish your remaining miserable people. Barkle talked back subtly to the king despite his despicable remarks. Do you think that my beloved people will allow me to leave them among Ravdan and the other prisoners and depart the city just like that? It seems very obvious. You are very wise, Barkle, and I am sure you will manage to find a way. I will order my troops to stop shelling for now and pull them back as a sign of goodwill until I see Ravdan again. I promise you, go for it now, and you will be rewarded exponentially. You know I always fulfill my vows. Then the king turned his back to Barkle, went on to the altar, and started to look like he was praying, or that is what he thought while he was escorted out by Marketh, and was then driven back to his surrounded city, accompanied by a heavy armed entourage, which escorted him on his way back. Marketh returned to the castle and went directly to the royal chamber, looking for the king. He found him still kneeling on the altar, deeply engaged in prayer. He waited for him until he finished his prayers. "My lord, what are your orders to the army?" The king walked toward the throne, and after settling down there, he spoke to Marketh. "They need to wait until Ravdan comes back from his plight. Your Majesty, the long delay of the attack on the city will do harm to our soldiers' morals and physical conditions, and the materials we already prepared are decreasing, so maybe we need to replace some of them, if not all of them." King Avauda was not paying much attention to Marketh's pleadings, as he was very busy in his own dilemma, thinking about bringing back Ravdan, the prisoner, and the apprehension of Mardak's judgment. Hashtag Chapter 16. The Bargaining. Barkal went back to his devastated city, received by hundreds of his people waiting for him at the city gates, hoping that he brought back with him everlasting peace and robust resolution to their rampant crisis and looming extinction. The expectations were high among the crowds, and they didn't realize their high hopes were impoverished and hollowed, or they might know, but they refused to believe and give up, and it's even harder for a leader like Barkal to return empty-handed, and worse, he had to betray his people to save his own finite life. Nonetheless, he knew in his heart that the temporary calm at the battlefront between the fighting armies was not a sign of endured peace and emerged optimism. It's a faint truce and a short lull to recalculate the wicked deeds of the Galatians' leadership. Barkal needed to address the crowd that was eagerly waiting for him, and it was a hard moment when he left his carriage and stood on a rock-like pedestal and started to yell, hoping he would be more convincing and firmer in his speech towards his own people. "My beloved subjects and faithful citizens, your older brother, myself, went and met King Avauda in his palace, for the hope to end this bitter, everlasting war and to relieve our suffering people and surrounded brothers, to stop the continuous bleeding of our fine people, and to rebuild our lives and a new future for our children. We talked not like winners and defeated, but like two equal rivals, and he paid the respect we deserved as formidable matches and equal rivals. We researched our best efforts to end the war and to endure the peace we long waited for, and I must tell my faithful citizens, we are on the right path, and our will shall never yield. Thank you for your trust and for the confidence you awarded me. We are all together in the same fate, under one almighty mercy." Then he raised his hands in solidarity with the gathering and went back to his carriage to continue his journey back to the council meeting, where the members are waiting and very eager to listen to what he has to tell them and what is in his bag to offer them. He passed through the demolished buildings and ruined architecture, contemplating in himself, what is the end? How would life be after death? Is it more beautiful than this bitter reality? Why should he listen to the weakness in himself? And what is worth living in shame without his people if he would betray and surrender himself to the cruelty of King Avauda? The carriage continued cutting the street while he was greeting the crowd gathered alongside the roads and was also followed by the multitudes, escorting him to the council, shouting slogans of unity and readiness, up until he reached the headquarters, dismounted from his carriage, and saluted the crowds upon his entrance to the survived building to speak to his deputies about his last meeting with the Galatians' king. It was a tense moment ahead of him, and he was prepared to uncover all the details of Avauda's plans concerning their fate. He went directly to his office, where Princess Lion was waiting for him alongside Ravdan and Prince Kador for special talks before the general meeting of the council. Barkal started by stating that King Avauda wants Ravdan at any price and at any cost. "It was a stupid trick from the king, as he offered me a safe refugee for myself and my family if I bring back to him Ravdan. Of course, not only there is absolutely no confidence in his offers and his intentions, but I won't ever rely on his assurances, and eventually, most importantly, I would never leave my people whatever happens, no matter what the consequences. I will be among my soldiers to defend our city until the last breath, but this great desire by your king and his endless efforts just to have you back still puzzle me and make me wonder why. You are not the most important officer he has under his command, are you?" Barkal continued. "I understand you are his son-in-law, but as we know from his nature, this is a mere frivolous and trivial matter for King Avauda the Merciless. Before I went to see King Avauda upon his request, my own calculation was to bargain with him over food supplies and maybe a breather from fighting. As I met him, I discovered the matter is much deeper, and we could even ask for more if our intentions were to turn you back. Can you explain this matter for me, Ravdan? I don't believe he appreciates me that much, as you described in much detail, but he dearly wants his amulet back. I think it is a very important item for him, and he gave it to me only because he was desperate to help me end my journey successfully and put an end to Princess Lion in the way he thought was the best. Ravdan answered and continued. I don't know the real secret behind this amulet, but we heard many unconfirmed speculations about it, and that could be an exaggeration from his subjects. They said it was given to him by no one else but Mardak himself after being blessed by Red Minas. It holds the key to immortality. It opens up the locked souls in the confined valley. Everyone sat in silence as they pondered this matter until Prince Kadorf asked Barkle, "Have you seen their military preparations?" Yes, I did. I've passed through their military lines, and their army looked very well prepared and was fully equipped, and I have noticed a large number of strange barrels stashed next to the caterpillars. Maybe Ravdan can explain it for us? It contains mixtures that can burn everything. They intended to drop it at your army front lines before entering the city. It is a very flammable and deadly substance. It can also create a thick cloud of gases that blind the eyes temporarily until they can eliminate the defenders. They prepared eye protection for their own soldiers to avoid any contact with these mixtures, which also stick to the clothes and evaporate poisonous gas to the body. They have prepared a large hay pallet made specially to be dropped from a tomb mountain against your army to cause chaos among the troops. But all these arrangements would be futile if it's left for a long time, as the substance's effectiveness will lose all of its effectiveness in a short time and become more or less a small firework. I think if they are serious about the attack, they should have already started, or either they need to wait for a few weeks to prepare another new strike or proceed without it and change the whole plan and attack with conventional means. However, there is no guarantee of any success as we know from past attempts. Without these new weapons introduced to the Galatians' troops, victory would be just a dream, and it is a difficult position for King Avauda now, though, on the contrary, your troops are in good position to surprise the lax Galatian soldiers with direct attack, especially since many of the Galatians' troops are busy removing and transporting back the ammunition, and the others are just setting and watching. Surely, they will be taken by surprise, as they know there is some type of negotiation going on at the time, and they won't suspect any assaults and hostilities activities from your army side. I would recommend speedy and fast actions to assault the Galatians' troops very soon. They were all listening to Ravdan's assessment of the situation right now, and then Prince Kadorf spoke. Our legions are ready to initiate any assault on the Galatians' troops if we give this order, but what would be our targets? We are surrounded from all sides except the south, where is the Holy Valley, and our troop is lagging by far behind in numbers and armaments compared to the Galatians' troops, and I don't believe it is a good idea to leave our secured positions and be charged upon without clear aims. You are right. Prince Kadorf, our limited army ability, restricts us from taking advantage of this opportunity as described by Ravdan, but if we wait without any action, they will resume their attack no doubt, and it would be the end. Burkle said. Yet Princess Lion had a different idea, and she asked Ravdan, "Can our troops get to King Avauda Castle?" All the men looked at the princess astounded and puzzled, examining the reasons behind her question. She continued after a brief silence and gathered her thoughts for elaboration on her idea. If our troops can capture King Avauda, maybe that would put an end to the suffocating siege on our people inside the city and might just end the whole bloody war for good. We should not forget that the wars were initially started when King Avauda decided to break away from the ex initia system of energy and source distribution between our planet nations equally, and he claimed to have a sacred convent with the Holy Almighty to secure and surrender everything that exists on this planet to him and his people alone. His army, under his leadership, attacked all other peaceful nations viciously and mercilessly in order to achieve his sick, unjustified ambitions at the cost of the lives of all people on the planet. If we could remove Avauda and eliminate him forever, the blurred visions that controlled the Galatians people would dissolve and thaw away, and it would clear their hearts from animosity and loathing that was filled in by their king's venomous bickering all the time. I don't believe that there is a sacred convent between King Avauda and the Holy Red Minas. It is merely a pretense disguise and deceitful plot to convince and enthuse his people to believe they are superior to the other inhabitants on this planet. Therefore, they should dominate and enjoy everything regardless of us. And for him to achieve his ultimate dream of being the king of all territories on this poor planet, let us gather our strength and destroy the head, and everything beyond will be dissipated and fizzled out. Its ashes shall weather away in the gashing winds that are overblowing in all directions. Peace will be ours whenever we are able to clear the poisonous king from our planet for good. Princess Lion concluded her thoughts. It is the most daring and bright idea I have ever enjoyed thinking about. Yet, Princess, please tell us, how do you expect our troops to get onto his palace? Asked Prince Kadorf in bewilderment and desperation. We can do it ourselves, Princess Lion replied. We're able to reach his castle, where he thinks he is safe hiding in that horrifying den, and I am willing to endeavor everything in achieving what Mardak advises me to end this bloody war. Have you met Mardak? Barkle asked Princess Lion in amazement. Yes, Master Barkle, I had the opportunity to meet him, and he kindly showed me the right path, and I understood from him that despite King Avauda's apparent strength and significant great powers in all military aspects, he is vulnerable, and his ring of steel and fire is fragile and can be broken and penetrated by our brave soldiers. Did he explain how we can do that? Asked Barkle and continued. It looks like an impossible mission to attain. I've seen his castle and been there. It's built on a huge rock in the middle of a lava lake, and no one can reach it without crossing the Bones Bridge. It is the only way, and at the same time, it is a small bridge surrounded by many guards. How can we even get there? I can't think of any possibility as yet. We need a really good trick only to get to the bridge, or perhaps we can convince him to leave his castle and come out, and by then we have a good chance of eliminating him. Master Barkle, you said he wants the prisoners to be returned. Let's do it then. Ravden can return among the other prisoners to King Avauda. However, before he does that, I will travel myself and cross the same way Ravden came from. I mean, I will pass through the Valley of the Confined Souls. By then, I will stay with Janice and wait for Ravden, who will take me with him to King Avauda's place, and we will put an end to that evil king for good. You are insane, Princess Lion, Kadorf said nervously and continued. How will you be able to cross the same path as Ravden? Who will let you pass? And how will Ravden sneak you inside of Auda's palace? It's a crazy and suicidal idea, and it won't have any chance of success. We are very limited when it comes to choices, and this mission deserves our attention. Barkle replied to Prince Kadorf. What about you, Ravden? We didn't hear anything back from you. What do you think? Prince Kadorf asked. Ravden was seemingly still in shock upon hearing Princess Lion plan to hand him over back to the Galatians while at the same time attacking their king. It was a very confusing moment, and he was not ready to answer yet. You planned the whole thing without asking me or even consulting about the whole matter. Yes, I share with you the same sentiment about King Ravden, and I believe that by his removal, the world would be more peaceful. How are we going to do it? How do you expect me to sneak you inside his palace? And how do you want to get rid of him? Ravdan asked Princess Lion and continued. You know how much I adore you, and I am sure you understand by now my true feelings. I won't be here for a minute, only because of you. And you want me to risk your life and take you to the death machine by myself? King Avauda is a very suspicious person, and he doubts everything around him, even the closest people around him. No one, including me, can get close to him without proper permission, and there is always a guard around him. I am not being negative or afraid, but I don't see how it will be done. She answered him, You are more important for us in your kingdom. You are our guide to King Avauda, and without you we can't implement this plan. You helped us so far by stopping this mad king from attacking our people for the last time, but it is just a very short relief to our people, and surely, he will continue his vicious plans relentlessly very soon if we can't seize this opportunity and get rid of him. I am asking you to help me get to him. We are doomed if we don't do anything, and there is a chance that we can live happily together, me and you, in a world very different than this, and I am sure we can achieve what we have dreamed of for so long. Ravdan didn't answer her immediately, but he held her hands and looked into her eyes for a while, and then he told everyone there. I am ready to do it, but we need to go through every detail to make sure we won't make any mistakes. Then Princess Lion started going over her plan details. As I mentioned before, I will try to cross the valley to the land of the mutineers. If I manage, I will stay in Janna's place with my guards for some time, and then we will cross the river Kosh into your land around the ruins of the old holy temple of Zediapolis. There, I will meet you, and then we shall travel towards Avauda place. I can disguise myself as your wife, Princess Kara. However, you need to get rid of her when I'll be there to avoid any interruption to our plan. Is that too much for you? Princess Lion asked. Ravdan answered her sincerely and continued. No, I never felt anything toward Kara. It was a forced marriage, and I am really happy to end this shameful relation. But talk about another matter, please, your safety, Princess Lion. You know Janice. She is a mercenary, and she would accept any bidder on your head. Do you feel absolutely safe around her? Even for a short time. Are you sure she won't expose the whole plan? Never worry about Janice. I know her very well, and that is why she is a valuable part of the big plan as well. She accepted your offers on the account that I told her about you and your mission beforehand. Otherwise, you won't be able to cross from there, and she is even more happy to help us get rid of Avauda and his army, who are threatening to annihilate her people like the rest of the non-Galatans on the planet, answered Princess Lion. Then Ravdan asked in curiosity, What do you think about the sacred amulet I'm holding? Should I return it to King Avauda? Or leave it here so he will be more vulnerable and less keen on his attacking plans, which could make him ask to be returned? Whatever power is in that amulet, I think the right thing is not to return it to him. Keep him busy with his demons and suspicious mind. Barkle, who received the amulet from Ravdan and placed it around his neck, then asked everyone to rejoin the council to explain the upcoming plans that they had just agreed upon. Chapter 17. General Zingi. Merely a few days passed after Barkle's return from his hostile visit to the Galatians as King of Avauda. The Malinese leadership sent an official message to inform the Galatians party that they intended on releasing their hostage, Ravdan, and his company back to them in due time. The king of the Galatians, upon hearing such news, was relieved to learn that Ravdan is heading back without having to exchange or pay anything for their safe return and, moreover, no need to extend his offer and host Barkle, leader of the Malinese, and his family in the Galatians' terrain. King Avauda immediately ordered the military brass to restart their efforts and preparations for the final attack, and then he called his daughter, Princess Kara, to inform her about the good news and her man's imminent release that would very soon materialize. Princess Kara traveled from her palace that was built in a small hamlet to meet her dad. She went with her guards and servants and reached the king's castle. No one allowed her to cross the Bones Bridge. She agreed and crossed the bridge towards the castle, and then she went inside. She spent the time waiting until she could be called to be present at the king's reception. After Princess Kara showed her respect according to the protocols, the king spoke and told her, "I promised you, daughter, that Ravdan will be safe, and he is coming back very soon. I know you've been very anxious about his fate, but he is a brave soldier, and I will not send him again to another dangerous task in the future. Tell me, are you calmer now?" She didn't tell him that she knew all about her husband coming back from his assistance, Garov, who is passing on to her all that is happening inside the royal chamber, even the private matters that Garov has access to, and she pretended joy and happiness in front of her dad upon hearing the update. Princess Kara has a habit of feigning untruthful feelings whenever she meets her dad, King Avauda, for the reason that she is afraid of showing her inner loathing and hatred towards him that has been entrenched inside her since he ordered her mother, Queen Elda, to be imprisoned for infidelity and consequently died in captivity after committing suicide by throwing herself into Kosh, the great lava river, and never being found anymore. Princess Kara couldn't take the humiliation she suffered for a long time from her dad, King Avauda, for being merely a weak girl. He never hides his love for men and his scorn and contempt toward her as a woman. And from her current husband, Ravdan, who used her to reach the higher ranks but never showed love or respect towards her. Father, I am very pleased and happy to hear that Ravdan is coming back. After all, I was very worried and I really missed him very much. I lit candles yesterday and prayed the whole time for his safe return, and my mother, Elda, had a vision come to me in my dreams to tell me that Ravdan is safe and well. Her father's facial expressions changed upon hearing the mention of her mother, and his mood altered dramatically. Don't bring back those forgotten memories from the past. I am happy everything ended in that way and had gone. Believe me, daughter, my life with Elda was unbearable. I keep repeating this story whenever you bring back her name. Get over it. You have just been married to the brightest soldier on this planet, and your full life is ahead of you. Please don't remind me again of this horrible past. Eventually, it was my mistake. I should have never married a woman. See our Almighty. It is a twin fire of the same kind, but in different colors and characters. This is our guidance. We have to be with our kind, which can only be achieved through immortality. Are you telling, my father, that I also made a mistake by marrying a man who happened to be my only love? Do you want me to love another woman? Daughter, you are grown up now, and you can decide what suits you best. I never forced you to take any step without your agreement, and I want you to be strong and prepared to be the next ruler of the great nation of the Galatians. Yes, daughter, your time will come. Even if I become immortal, just like our Almighty. That is the convent I made, and I shall keep it forever. She thought to herself, my father is absolutely obsessed, and his mind is in dire insanity. Though she asked to leave his intolerable presence. Father, I have to leave now and prepare for a very big reception to my lost and found heart and soul, if I may. She kneeled and left the royal chamber, followed by Garov, who accompanied her outside the castle. You were very rough on your dad, the king, Princess Kara, Garov told her. I never meant to be rough to him, but he always wished in his heart that I was a strong boy resembling himself instead of a stupid and weak girl that carried his holy name. He still loves you, despite everything. But tell me, what will you do when Ravdan arrives here? I'll take him in my arms and never let him go away again. Now I need to go. She embarked upon her carriage and went towards her home while Garov intended to return to his master, the king. Nonetheless, he stood still and waited when he noticed a special carriage approaching the castle from far. It was a military carriage and was escorted with many guards. It should be a high-ranking general, Garov said to himself. Upon arriving at the castle, the carriage door was opened, and General Zingy disembarked and walked toward Garov, who was standing on the bridge edge. "General Zingy, sir, I hope you are all right." "Garov." The general passed him and proceeded towards the castle. He has a meeting with the king. On the other side of the bridge, Marketh was waiting to accompany the general inside the castle. General Zingy was and is still one of the king's closest friends, and he has been his companion since they were young, and they took part together in many hunting exercises. The king admires his strength and determination, but General Zingy was very ambitious, and that worries the king even more. Although General Zingy never showed in the past any desire to counter the king's orders as he was always the obedient servant to Avauda's whims and cruel intentions, his position was the highest among the army generals, and he was reporting only to the king himself, as he was doing just right now at the royal castle. Marketh led him to the royal chamber, where the king was waiting for him patiently. Inside the general's mind, there were doubts that his time as head of the entire army was about to come to an abrupt end, as he thought that his replacement was ready to assume his beloved job, and that his last duty would be to end the besieged city campaign successfully and bow afterwards to the new head of the army, Ravdan, the true contender for his future authority at the army head position. Albeit, he was shocked on hearing that his nemesis had crossed toward the besieged city. He was hoping that he would eventually fail in his mission there, and prayed that the best scenario that would come to pass was the demise of Ravdan inside that city after being captured. However, General Zingy is now at the King Avauda royal chamber reception for a different matter. "Your Majesty, you called upon me. I hope there is great news to announce." "Yes, General Zingy, Ravdan is coming back very soon. Our enemy, the Malanis, will hand him over to our brave troops." "Yes, Your Majesty, that is really good news. Did they mention anything about his condition? Or did they ask for any ransom on his head?" "The good thing is that they did not, and I am hoping that they kept their promise to treat him well and the other prisoners as well." "That is a too generous and quite liberal offer from them, Your Majesty. Don't you share my thoughts, sir?" The king paused a bit for a thought, and his enthusiasm dampened and curbed drastically as he started thinking about the whole matter again from a different angle. "Are you suggesting something rotten behind it? Do you, General Zingy, share what I am suspecting?" General Zingy can at last claim that he managed to plant the seeds of suspicion inside the king's ruthless heart. "Your Majesty, we are in fierce surviving wars that will end their total demise and complete extinction on this planet, and they know that for sure, and to release such a valuable military figure like Ravdan quite easily without any military demands or strategic concessions, from my experience, it seems hard to believe. They can definitely barge for more, and I am sure you would, Your Majesty, offer them many things for his safe return." "You are almost right, General Zingy, but what do you think you are supposed to do with him upon his return home?" asked the king. "Ravdan's knowledge of our military plans is very deep and elaborated. We need to know how much he told them and what they managed to extract from him and the other prisoners. We must alter our preparations and reinforce our defenses until we formulate a new plan, and I suggest that he and his company have to be interrogated professionally by my intelligence officers for that purpose." "Your Majesty, I know it is a very sensitive matter for you considering your daughter, Prince Kara, and I appreciate her anxiety during the time of his absence while she was waiting for him throughout all this difficult period and my fears over her unpredicted reaction to learn that her man is needed to be questioned thoroughly by the army agents. But for our nation's safety and for our future military plans, we have to do the proposal without any passions, ardor, or other interferences from anyone. Your Majesty, we have to ask him as well about what he has noticed inside the Malinese last standing fort and what their defenses and plans are to counter our attack. We shall be very careful, and I promise you, we won't do him any harm, only with your permission. It was a big shock and unexpected change to the whole plans made by King Avauda, and he has been put in a very tentative and embracing situation. After all, it was his plan that failed totally, and subsequently, his army would have been exposed and his own ambitious general would be in charge, which will leave him in a weak position, and he needs to correct his own wrong planning by himself. Leave me now, General Zingi. I will think about the whole matter and inform you about what needs to be done. The king dismissed the general, who left the royal chamber in a rather happy mood. General Zingi fought all these years fiercely for the sake of the king, and he made a lot of sacrifices and achieved victory after victory. He does not want to end to deliver everything that was achieved to that arrogant officer, Ravdan, who will simply take over his prime position and assume his place in the army, and he will be left in the shadow of the only unified and surviving nation inside that planet. It was a difficult fate envisaged in deep resentment that filled inside General Zingi, and it could be his time to assume the kingship and become the deservedly earned king after all that scarifies him. Thoughts are stuffing and dominating General Zingi's mind. He can let it pass, and the thought to himself is that he has been the true relentless servant all the past time for that. Inexorable and implacable King Avauda, only for that individual to build his own immortal imperial throne over the whole planet. For the general, it is the right time to strike forth and abrogate that monstrous creature and change everything in his favor. All the army officers and soldiers know General Zingi very well and seemingly admire the courage and bravery he demonstrated for them throughout the war years. He is counting on them to stand firm behind the general's ambition and totally depend on their loyalty to assume his truthful future position. On his mind, he survived many assassination attempts, however, all but failed, and his legacy will remain for good, according to rumors, right? Is he being protected by no less than the Almighty? And he has other obstacles hampering his way towards that bloody throne. Even if he were able to neutralize Ravdan, there is still Marketh, the king's personal executioner, and the special royal guards unit standing in his way to claim the Avauda throne. He told himself that he had to take on both of them, but what about the king's daughter, Princess Kara? He always liked her very much, but she preferred Ravdan over him, perhaps due to the age differences. He was telling himself, in much pain and sorrow, that he still liked her until this very moment. Maybe she would change her mind and accept him as the only man and the new king at the same time. I will keep on trying despite her first rejection and her big mistake to choose Ravdan over me. The general told himself this, combined with the thoughts that kept playing in his mind while he was in his carriage on his way to the military headquarters post. Chapter 18. The Plot Uncovered. A large military entourage left the Malinese army post at the front defense line and advanced towards the Galatians' military-opposed frontier and crossed into the buffer zone that separated the fighting legions until that entourage came to a halt and stopped before reaching the Galatians' troops' positions. Subsequently, the prisoners disembarked and walked out of those military carriages, heading towards the Galatians' army posts, and finally joined their own troops after being released from the Malinese captivity, which lasted only for a few days. Ravdan and his unit went on and embarked on other military carriages belonging to the Galatina's forces, which were waiting for them after a deal was struck between the Malinese and Galatians, and moved back towards the military headquarters where the Galatians' intelligence officers were waiting for them. Upon arriving at that military and intelligence headquarters, the released prisoners were separated, and against the amazement and protesting of Ravdan, as he was denied contact with his wife, Princess Kara, he was led into a room where he had a meeting with the army chief, who was at the reception waiting for him. After a few exchanges of formal words, The military chief explained to Ravdan that these procedures are normal and necessary in such cases for the reason that they are about the army's own security and the nation's safety, and more importantly, they are the king's orders and consequently have to be respected and literally implemented, as there are no other choices left for Ravdan to choose from. He walked, humbled by the orders, and followed his interrogators to a special room previously prepared for this purpose. Still, he was hoping inside of him that it would last for only a short period of time, as he anticipated by his own right calculations that his wife would be waiting for him impatiently at his reception, knowingly of his imminent arrival back from the detention. Surprisingly, it was a big disappointment for everyone involved in this failing, adventurous plot, except for Ravdan, for the obvious reasons. However, he had more to worry about. He felt afraid that he had been exposed, that his secret pact with the Malanese would have been uncovered somehow, and that his life was about to come to an end. He knew for certain that traitors like him would lose their heads as simple as a dandelion seed head if their crime was to be proven, and their own reputations consequently would be tarnished. That could also hurt their families, who would suffer and be discarded as filth in society, and many other terrible consequences would be descended upon them. It was not the best outcome he would have hoped for, and all the plans he had made for his future and his own aspirations, which seemed now conspicuously shattered and fairly collapsed. He is now under the mercy of his officer-interrogator, and his last remaining hopes would be devised by either passing this test successfully without being divulged or being helped mercifully by his own influential royal wife. It was a onerous and peculiar prospect he was pondering. However, he is fighting desperately for his own life, and he needs to be very careful in his answers. The interview started with a short encounter between Ravdan and his interrogator officer, who, after a few short, insignificant questions, burst in on Princess Kara forcibly into the military building and demanded blatantly that her man be released immediately. It was a very embarrassing event that took place suddenly at the military headquarters, and the chief officer had to apologize for the distressed princess, but he told her that it was her father, King Avauda, personal orders to conduct the interview for her man and to take place inside the military headquarters. Nevertheless, that explanation from the officer did not stop or deter Princess Kara from insisting on his immediate release, despite the chief's countless appeals to her. At last, the fierce confrontation and the clamor aroused by the princess's challenging behavior were alleviated and mellowed to a degree when General Zingi appeared in the main hall and invited her to his office. Princess Kara agreed to speak with General Zingi privately in his office, as he was attempting to mitigate her rage and anger with a few nice words. Your Highness, Princess Kara, our deepest and sincere apology for what happened. I hope you are much calmer by now, therefore we can speak quietly. No, General Zingi, I am still furious for the manner in which you treated my brave husband. He scarified his own life and went upon my father's orders to enter the Malanese city despite the grave danger and the perilous mission he had been burdened with and assigned to achieve. And now he is back safely from there, nonetheless, under grief suspicious of disloyalty, and he would have to pay back your own army's poor planning and your intelligence's glaring mistakes, replied Princess Kara. Your Highness, it was never my idea to send Ravdan inside the besieged city, and I would never endanger my brave officers and expose them to any possible hazardous situations, especially when it concerns your man, Ravdan, my best deputy. You know how much I deeply admire you and I appreciate your concerns as wife, but you should also understand our position. It is all based on your father, His Majesty King Avauda, orders that we should obey and implement, answered General Zingi. General Zingi, please release my husband now. I missed him so much, and I promise you that I will head directly towards the castle and speak with my father, the king, and explain to him everything that took place right here and why I, myself, impelled and obliged you to discharge him immediately. I will never forget your kindness, General Zingi, said Princess Kara. I would never refuse any request from you, dear Princess Kara. He can go for now. I will order the officer to suspend his interviewing for now until it's more convenient for you, Your Highness. But one thing I need to tell you before you leave beside your husband. You are our future queen and the head of the great Galatians army. My ultimate concern would be your utmost interest and your safety. I hope you forgive me, answered General Zingy. I appreciate your kindness, General Zingy. You will always be my best friend. Then both of them went out of the office, and the general ordered his soldiers to release Ravdan, who went out full of joy, accompanying his wife to the royal carriage, which apparently took them back home. After their rapid departure, General Zingy went back to his office and held a short meeting with his deputies to explain his blatantly coerced decision to let Ravdan walk away from this important interrogation. He then dismissed the gathering and ordered his officers to continue questioning the rest of the unit thoroughly and carefully despite what just happened at the headquarters, which seemed to worry him to a great extent. After all, General Zingy needs to answer to the king and explain his leniency and not firmly following the king's orders. Even though he has a very good reason, he still needs to prepare himself for any unforeseen consequences of his own decision. On the other hand, he did not feel that his hidden schemes had been weakened, faltered, or even totally collapsed. Nevertheless, on the contrary, he would have thought that he had made the king angrier and even more worried by his own daughter's sudden interference in those meticulous military procedures. There was a great chance that the king would order Marketh to sever Ravdan's head out of his body in one of his outrage moments, or, at the very least, discarded him totally from any military role. In this case, General Zingy would achieve prime dominance over the army without a real contender to his sacred position and could proceed with his own plans to throw the king himself out of the throne. For the general's own ambitions, it was conceived as a good outcome, whichever of the previous ideas would have materialized, by all means, except for the thought of losing his own head, the outcome he feared the most from that merciless king. Since Princess Kara forced her man's departure from the interrogation chamber and the possible detention by the military forces, the officers could not stop the violations of the king's order as they left the building together and went into their way. Princess Kara sat next to her husband in the royal carriage, heading home as it was planned, immersing herself in thinking. It is a joy to have her husband back from almost a sure demise, and after the thought that she would never be able to see him again, yet, for now, another dangerous task is to keep him beside her. After all, her father lost all confidence in him for some obscured reasons and won't trust him in the future for any important positions in his kingdom hierarchy. Princess Kara turned to her man and told him, Ravdan, we must head directly to face my father and explain everything I have done. You have to get your place back on top, no matter what he thinks of you. I assure you he would be very angry and upset when he hears what we have just done. I would be the best scapegoat to lean on for his failed plans. Ravdan said. Yes, maybe you are right. Nonetheless, he also needs to explain himself why you were his first choice to be sent in there, and why they need to imprison you upon your return. After all, you were performing your duty. We have to be there and face him instead of you hiding and waiting for his mercy that maybe will never arrive. Furthermore, I need you alive and well beside me. Princess Kara answered. She ordered her guards and the entourage to head towards the king's castle, and upon their sudden arrival without invitation, Marketh went to the king in his chamber to inform him about his daughter and her unexpected appearance. The king, in his desolate chamber, was waiting for any update that could emerge from the army officers who were busy questioning Ravdan and extracting information about his last stint, though he was alerted by the Argent Marketha's request. Your Majesty, Princess Kara, and her husband, Officer Ravdan, are at the castle gate, and they are requesting your attendance. Ravdan is here? Who let him leave the army headquarters? The king questioned with quite displeasure. I don't know, Your Majesty, but the princess is with him right now. and that might explain things even better than I do. Marketh answered. The king didn't respond and grant their audience immediately, but he kept himself thinking about this matter for a period of time until he finally told Marketh, "They can wait for now, and let them in after I complete my praying, and you should inform General Zingi to be present at the meeting, and moreover, you will be standing beside Ravdan waiting for my orders." The king said. Marketh, the executioner, understood the king's own wicked wishes and prepared himself for implementing any orders that come forth from the king. Notwithstanding any feelings or emotions in this case, someone must lose his or her head to compensate for all of that chaotic failure and horrible conclusion of the secret daring mission. End of Part 4.